Hi, everybody. I'm Kate, and it gives me amazing gratitude that Leah Calnan, the former head of REIV, is our guest today on this property management podcast. Now, I'm going to introduce Leah, but she can maybe correct me. And then there are so many subjects that Leah is not only an expert in, but I really want to dig into what makes her and her business, which she also runs very successfully, what makes that work well. And then if we have time, we can talk about things like the budget that just got passed, although as we were discussing before, it seems property and investors haven't been penalised in Victoria, which is fabulous. So for those that are experienced in property management Australia, Leah needs no introduction. But in case you haven't heard of her, she's based in Melbourne. She has almost 30 years experience in the property management industry. Now, 2 terms of that was as the president of the real estate industry of Victoria, otherwise known as REIV, which she did over COVID times in one of the most locked down territories or states in the world. She's been on the board of REIV as well since 2018. For our international listeners, the Real Estate Institute of Victoria is the peak representative body for the real estate professionals in the state of Victoria, Australia. Leah has developed as well thousands of property managers throughout this state with her courses and workshops on many varied topics from basics communication to advanced legislation, negotiation and communication skills. To add to this, Leah is the mother, proudly, of 3 boys, 2 twins who are 18 and one 16-year-old. She runs a very busy, successful property management business in Melbourne that she has run for 18 years, as well as being available for speaking and consulting. And I'll make sure all of Leah's relevant links are near this video. I do want our listeners to know what makes you tick, Leah. Plus, let's discuss a little bit of the background in the industry. And I do want your perspective as well, if we have time, on some of the tougher subjects facing landlords and investors today. And of course, property managers and the future of the industry. Leah, can we just start with you? What made you decide to go into property management, and why have you decided to stay all of this time, being that it's a challenging industry for a lot of people?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Look, it's always weird and awkward when people read out all the things I've done. I just feel like I've ticked the box and moved on onto a new thing. So it is a little bit confronting when everything's kind of listed. For me, I moved out of home at the age of 18 with my boyfriend at the time. We were renting, and I have to say the receptionist, when I would go in and pay the rent, was such a horrible lady. And she would go in with our cash, and she was almost like, thanks. And, reporting maintenance was really scary. And that actually triggered my interest. I was working in a sports centre. I didn't know what I wanted to really do when I left school. I love animals. I knew I'd probably never be a vet because I'd bring home all of the sick and injured and all of the animals. So that was never going to work. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how I fell into property management. And then I went off and actually did what was called your agent's rep back then. I failed twice, which is a little ironic, because I just kind of didn't get an understanding of what the wording and the language and the lingo was meant to be. And then I just submitted my resume continually over and over again until somebody in the Armadale area actually gave me an opportunity to get into the industry.
Interesting. And so then when did you start? When did you break out onto your own and start your own?
Um, I ended up, so over a course of, my goodness, how many years? Probably 10 years working with different brands. So most of the brands that we see across the Victorian state now. I then worked for some directors who wanted to retire, and I'd been in that business maybe for about 5, 6 years, and they gave me the opportunity to actually buy the business from them, the rent roll. So I went into partnership with that particular group accountant. That kind of went south after a few years, and then I've been running Metro on my own now for 15, 16 years.
And what do you think it is that's helped you to stay in the industry? Because it seems like such a, well, it doesn't seem like it actually is a high pressure industry, and there must be some reward for people like yourself that have been in it for decades, because I assume, maybe incorrectly, that there is a high turnover, because it does seem like
Yeah.
stress. What are some of the things that you think help people to stay, either attitudes or a personality type before they get into it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think resilience is enormous. I've really learnt the ability to bounce. So, if I'm down, I get back up. You get told no so many times, you make mistakes, you learn from them. I think resilience is an enormous attribute for the world of property management. I think it's probably lacking a little bit in the newer generation of property managers that are coming through, because there's so many different career opportunities out there now in comparison to, when I finished BCE and looked for that next step. I think also think the industry is it's amazing. You meet so many people, you learn so much. Like my knowledge on houses and maintenance, and whether it be, from plumbing to electrical to building, I don't have qualifications in any of those fields, but I understand how a house is built. So you make really lifelong friends, and your clients can stay with you for a really long time because they trust you. And you are so responsible for, millions and millions of dollars worth of assets. So it's an amazing industry, and it's a shame that there is such a high turnover.
It is, I guess it filters, to say it harshly, the wheat from the chaff, because
Yeah,
you have to be resilient. But you've
yeah.
obviously found like that resonates with the way you are as a human. And in terms of, oh, there were so many questions that just peaked because of what you said. I'm like, oh, can you come and help me with what I'm purchasing next? You can be the building inspector. What are some of the courses actually that you've developed that because of I guess gaps in the market, or gaps in training, or gaps in personality strengths or career opportunities, like what are some of the things that you've developed because of that, because of your experience?
Property management has always been, the part of the business that, we often call, it was left in the corner. People would come into the real estate industry and people would say to me, when are you moving into sales? There was never that desire for people to want to actually stay, or a knowledge, or maybe an understanding of actually staying in property management. So, over time, I've seen, an REOV during my time on the board of 9 years. There were lots of pieces of communication and training that were developed in order to continue to improve a property manager's knowledge. Because one of the downfalls of Victorian legislation is there's no CPD. So CPD is obviously a continual professional development. It's not compulsory, but it is compulsory when you're a member of REIV, which is fantastic. But it's not compulsory for people who are not part of REIV. So, people can get into this industry and then, not do any training. And in particularly in PM space, where we've seen legislation change back in 21, again in 23, you have to continually update your skills and knowledge. And it can be from understanding to how you interpret a piece of legislation in regards to rent arrears, or how now property managers have to work with both VCAT and the magistrates court. Even picking up the phone, we've lost the skill of picking up the phone and saying, hey, let's not do this email table tennis back anymore. Pick up the phone and you can actually reduce the issues in probably 5 minutes versus the 5 days of email. So there's lots of those skill sets, and reminding people it is scary at times, and you might get it wrong, and you probably will get it wrong. I get it wrong. Probably from a training point of view, one of our most popular training components is our case studies, because they come from my office. And it demonstrates we get things wrong, and we get things wrong not all the time. But when we get it wrong, we all, as my team now, collectively go, oh, this is a great case study. Let's take that out to the industry so you can don't do what Leah did, or don't do what Leah's PM did. And I think that resonates with people so that they can see that, I make mistakes, you know, every day still. I'm not perfect. I'm sure my kids will tell anyone that. Um, but I think that's definitely an added extra for the industry.
Leah could talk all day of the things that she's teaching people.
Mm.
With regard, two questions now. So let's make sure there's a link to that download or course regarding the case studies somewhere near this recording. And I guess there's the perspective of the potential landlord and then also property managers. Answer either way or both if you like. With regards to being a member of REIV, obviously there are benefits. I understand with every industry, if you have professional development, requirements, that's great, a great thing. But how does a layperson like myself choose somebody? So a landlord, I guess, first.
Yeah, look, I think it's changing with regards to investors. Investors would often just go to the local real estate office. And my business model of 18 years is not area specific. So it's very different. We're based in Surrey Hills, but we're in Surrey Hills because we're in between two major freeways. That's the main reason. So it allows us flexibility to be in and out of the office more. And I think there's more of a niche market in that property management space. We don't do sales. We're not about, managing the huge egos that are often part of sales businesses and the franchise groups. I don't miss that at all. Sorry for any of the salespeople that are listening. But I think from an investor's point of view, there is a real niche. And if you find a property manager that actually knows their stuff, you will find your journey of investment so much easier rather than going, who can I get the cheapest fee from? And then they wonder why they have a different name when they call the office every 3 months. So part of the issue out there is actually the investors who don't want to pay quality for service.
While we're on that, could you expand? Because what is the difference? What is the difference, and why should somebody look into a better property manager? What are the differences in services that they get?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. Generally, in most real estate offices, and it's starting to slightly change, but it's still majority. Majority of real estate businesses are owned by the top selling salesperson, and usually that is their key focus. So property management sits, somewhere over there. The majority of the business is focused on sales and obviously, making X amount of sales and earning X amount of commission per annum. And a lot of their rent rolls are developed by default because an investor comes and buys from them, and then all of a sudden they say, well, can you manage it? And they're like, oh, okay. And can you manage this one? And oh, okay. So they then develop this really small rent roll, but they then don't have the knowledge or the skill set to be able to train and develop somebody to actually manage the asset. So they find somebody, they advertise somebody for a role, property manager, looking for a property manager. They throw somebody in who's green, and potentially that property manager has amazing level of ability and skill set, but if they're not developed and trained and um, given an understanding of what they need to do, then they just churn in the industry. And that's what happens. People go for, they're attracted to maybe a salary, but they don't realize they need training and development and constant training and development. And that would be the question that I would be, as an investor, when you're searching for a property manager, what training and development do you do? And how often do you do it? Because if your property manager is not up to date with their knowledge and their skills, then, there are going to be issues, and they might not be present straight away. But when things go to crap, you need somebody who knows exactly how to get out of that.
And it's funny when things turn that way, it's often a little too late, isn't it? It's a bit hard to then put the
Yeah,
staff through training and development, which, oh, by the way, that's not for 6 months. Shit. Pardon.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we often get files or clients contacting us and saying, can you fix this? So, we can almost fix anything, but it comes at a charge. We have to charge for the time in order for us to fix it.
In saying that, because you do have so many years, not just in the industry, but in running your own teams and obviously managing I don't know how to scale the numbers or if that's even an impolite thing to speak about, but as in number on rent roll, I know that you do hundreds of suburbs. But what are some other takeaway tips, if you're happy to give them, that people running property management businesses could do? And I understand there's probably different levels, so feel free.
I think what's really important is when you have changes of team members, you need to relook at your business model. You can't keep plugging in somebody to fit a gap. And that's what a lot of businesses do. They don't induct, they don't develop, they don't train, and then they wonder why they churn. There are businesses, and I remember when I started all those years ago, you basically were told, there's your desk, there's the phone, my office is around the corner, only come to me if there's an emergency type thing. There are still businesses who do that, and that frightens me enormously because that is the churn result. And then we all wonder as a collective, as the industry, why do we keep losing people? It's because of bosses like that do that. So within your business, you have to have an induction, and that induction might be for the first 2 weeks. They actually don't answer the phone because the last thing a client wants to hear is, oh, sorry, I'm new, I'm still learning. Like that just freaks me out when people say that, because do you know how horrendous that sounds from a client's point of view? You can be new, but you can phrase it to say, look, I'm not familiar with that, or I haven't come across that. So let me find out and I'll come back to you. But they throw them on the phones and off they go. And that's part of the issue, but also not using technology, not using other resources, trying to just fit, I suppose, what's that saying, a round hole in a square peg with a square peg. Yeah, that's what they try and do.
Can you speak a little bit about technology for a moment? What are some of the great new things or old things that you could rely on that you don't need to get rid of? This XYZ manual system. I know that you do some outsourcing of work purely to make your property managers' lives easy. And in fact, it sounds like a great place to work in comparison to a lot. So what are some of the tech things that you think, as of now, we're in May 2024 at the time of recording this, that you think are good for people to use?
There's some great software out there. Majority of the agencies use the Property Me software. I don't think as agencies, and I can say this as a business owner, I don't know how to use that at its full capacity. So, it's about sometimes coming off the tools and learning a little bit more so that you're not so reliant on somebody else doing it. I want to be able to do as much as I possibly can so that, monkey see, monkey do. I'm a big believer in that saying. Making sure the software works for you with regards to your inspections. During COVID, we actually introduced, virtual inspections for both viewing properties, but also for routine inspections. There's no reason why those pieces of technology can't still be used. And in fact, we use them a lot through virtual tours for leasing properties, but we also run virtual routine inspections so that the property manager, when a tenant has been in a property for, 3, 4, 5 years, property manager doesn't have to be there every 6 months. They still do a physical inspection once a year, but they do a virtual one on others. So it's a time saver from one perspective, but it also gives us the information that we need. So it's utilizing that technology that's available and thinking, how can we do it differently? How can we get a better result? Where can we gain, I don't know, 5-10% extra hours in the day to be able to have better conversations with our clients? Where can we learn? How can we learn more? Those sort of things.
Actually, that reminds me, we must talk about the fact that you've also got an event coming up for National Property Managers Day, but in one sec. So you spoke then about people learning the technology, monkey see, monkey do. I'm a big fan of people in my industry, ex-fitness industry, understanding how things work purely so you hire a better person as well. You don't have to necessarily teach them, but I'm in the digital marketing space now. People get the wool pulled over their eyes because they hire somebody that might say that they know how to do things, and if you don't understand what the capacity of that thing can do, it doesn't work, does it? In saying that, and I know in our introduction before we popped on here, you mentioned you like the positivity of the whole thing because people, I think generally humans also, we like to whinge. There's always lots of points to
We
whinge.
do. Yeah. Yeah.
On the positive note, where would you like to see this industry go in the next few years?
Look, I would love to see fees increase. I would love to see there be a greater understanding of the skill set that a good property manager needs and a greater respect for the property management industry rather than just assuming we collect the rent and pay the owner and do some maintenance here and there. There's so much more than it ever has been. Like it's never been this complicated, um, and dealing with so many different pieces of legislation. I think also, we wanted to see an increase in the qualification, which the state government did bring in, which I was pleased, and we always wanted it, but the timing was terrible. It was just after COVID. So basically it meant the qualification went from doing a minimal, 3 modules, which was pretty crap, really, considering, but to 18 modules. So, and there's nothing in between. So you can't bring team members on and develop them whilst they're doing the qualifications technically. So there needs to be a variation done there with government so that you could actually have a staged qualification. You do modules 1 to 6, and then you can do these items within a real estate firm type scenario. But I think as an industry collectively, we have to stop complaining. We need to be more respective of each other. And, we often hear there's a race to the bottom of who's going to charge the least. There's so many areas where property managers and the industry could have and should have increased their fees with all the new workload, and many didn't. Some did, many didn't. So kind of don't complain now when you had that opportunity. And if you haven't done it, think about it, because your value to your clients is very much underrated at times. And that's partly the industry's fault.
When you say the industry, who's responsible? I was in not blame. Obviously, the people doing the thing at the end of the day, we're all responsible, the humans. But how do you change legislation? Does the government or whoever's
Yeah, it's
ask you to consult?
Yeah, look, a government does have some, will generally have consulting arrangements with peak bodies like REIV. They will sometimes come out to the larger franchise groups and be seeking consultation there. But I think because of the general setup of a lot of real estate businesses where their main focus is sales, they tend to not rock the boat with regards to increasing fees, because those rent rolls are basically a filter of stock that goes through to their sales area. So, where we're seeing a real shift, and, it's probably been over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, is this increase in specialists in the PM space. So, directors moving out of those stock standard real estate groups and those stock standard real estate offices and setting up their own rent rolls and showing this is my area of specialty. We see it a little bit with some salespeople. We've seen the introduction with the buyers agents and vendors agents. But that's probably where we'll see more of it over the next few years.
Good. And why not specialize? As in,
Yeah.
why have everybody under the one roof if it could be a specialist topic, which it obviously is? That's very interesting hearing about the evolution of it. Now, if we fast forward to today, and at the time of making this, the budget for the state was released in the last 24 hours, actually Wednesday, I believe it was, or Tuesday evening. If we bring everybody up to date on what's going on in the current affairs, not literally the television show The Current Affairs, but there's interest rate rises happening, there's investors leaving, and that's obviously surface level, apart from the fact that everybody, including all of us, is feeling the pinch financially because groceries, everything's gone up. What topics, if anything, Leah, can you either advise us on, or can you see that might happen that's a little bit more positive? Or what is there that we don't know by just watching the regular news? Whereas you're in there, you're getting your hands dirty, you're very much in the industry. What do you know that we don't know, basically, about the sign of the times at the moment? Or is there anything?
Look, I think the rental crisis is here for a little while, particularly, and I say Victoria, but I think it's probably Australia-wide. There is no signs of new stock coming through. You might have one or two investors come through to businesses, maybe each month, maybe you're up to 5 per month, but that doesn't replace the 5 to 10 investors that are potentially leaving those businesses each month. So there is absolutely a rental shortage. If you'd asked me this time last year, I was kind of expecting that we would see this year, 2024, would be the last round of rent increases. But where we are today in May, I think we'll see another round of rent increases in 2025. I think it's going to push people harder. And that, state government, the Andrews government, was well advised by REIV and many, many other people that all of the factors that they were introducing was going to put pressure on the rental market. And where people don't understand is that they think that when an investor sells a property, that it instantly, it goes to a first home buyer, and that's great. And it absolutely is, because generally they're in that pocket of, let's say, $500,000 to $1 million, and they often will sell, 95% will sell to an investor, to an owner occupier. However, what it doesn't do is replace that piece of stock. So when we've got, I think the number is somewhere around 350,000 people coming in from an immigration point of view just into our state. We have an increase in students coming back from the China and surrounding countries. So yes, those investor properties do sell to owner occupiers, but we're not replacing the stock. So when your rental vacancy rate sits anything below 3%, it's deemed as critical, and it sits at something like 0.7 at the moment. So I don't know how far you can deem critical when it's sitting at 0.7. But that's really what is going on in the market at the moment.
What do you see then as a solution? As in, I guess there's the ideal solution, and then there's this is what's actually going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been said numerous times, and anytime I'm interviewed in the media, I say you've got to re-incentivize investors to come back into the market. You've got to stop penalising them. For every owner that's got an apartment now, they pay a piece of land tax of $975. Apartments never had land tax. Now, everyone has land tax in the scheme of things. So they need to incentivize investors to come back into the market, because of all the properties that are available across Australia, 91% are owned by the private rental sector. 91%. So you need investors. It doesn't matter if you're, Labor voter, Greens voter, Liberal voter, but you have to understand this country needs investors. And, some of those politicians, need to change their thinking and stop focusing on getting their next 4-year term and thinking, well, all of my votes go towards, whoever. They need to think about this housing supply market, because it's not going to get any better.
Just on that topic, I mean, wouldn't the world be better if all politicians had the live a day in our shoes, and not just at the short term, but the long term? And
yeah, absolutely.
So if you could have a conversation with anybody in the world, alive, Australian, overseas, it doesn't matter, on this, and you knew that they were going to make a difference, or maybe it would just inspire you because you could record the conversation and the word would go out, who would that be? guess it's a
No.
question who also, and I threw the curly one at you, didn't I? So
Yeah.
what's the question of who inspires you in this industry that you might believe that would make change? Or maybe it's
I think we as a collective just have to continue to work together to make a change. And, sooner or later, and maybe now with the further increases of, the land tax that's now hitting investors, maybe now renters who have seen rent increases go up, $100 a week, maybe they're now going to actually see it's not the real estate agent's fault and it's actually not the investor's fault, but we need to see a change of government in Victoria. Because there needs to be a change of policy in this space. It can't just be about releasing more land and building more homes, because you're never, ever going to be able to have the supply to replace what has been lost. So what you need to do is incentivize, like we do for first home buyers, and give them a lift into the sale market, or the first home buyer market. We're going to need to do something in the investor market to make it attractive for the next 10 years, because otherwise, my 18-year-olds are never going to move out of home because they won't be able to afford to rent or afford the food bill. But they have to do something differently, and they can't just keep doing the same. Um, but until it's a reflection on voters and voters actually feel like there has to be a change, then I don't think anything will change.
wow. And if we were to finish on a positive note, um, what's something inspiring that you could share with other property managers?
Um, Enjoy every moment of the career that you have. Like, it is a fantastic career, and I know there's shitty days. I get it. I have them too. But every day is a new day. You wake up and you learn from what you do. Don't let one situation, one client, one boss make you decide that this is not a great industry. So if you've come across an investor that you don't want to work with anymore, then tell your boss, and maybe you can do a swap with another PM. If you've come across a boss that isn't the boss that you want to support and work with and learn from, change businesses and see what other opportunities are out there, because there are so many great leaders across our industry. And I think a lot of them float under the radar because they're just doing, day-to-day work, and they forget that they might be influencing the next generation of people coming through to the industry.
Again, it comes back to long-term thinking sometimes, doesn't it, with everything?
Yeah.
So if you have a moment to riff on, thank you so much for your time, but if you have a moment to riff on National Property Managers Day that's happening this year, and you have an event coming up, let's
Yeah.
give it a bit of a plug. What's that?
Yeah. Yeah. So look, I'm so pleased that we're doing another event for National PM Day. We know that directors, again, generally don't want to send out their property managers for a lunch. They want to have some professional development around it as well. So it's a half day. We start with Tommy Little, which he should be very funny and get us all, energized. And then we're really focusing on AI, understanding how you can actually use AI better, because I see there's so much opportunity there, and it's one of the things I've been talking to Coops, one of the twins, about. Show me and teach me how we can do better in the leasing space or in the new business space with regards to AI, and what pieces of communication can we generate. And then realestate.com is a great it's a great product. Everyone uses it, but understanding from a PM point of view how you can build your profile and work out how you can develop client bases and get in and be exposed to, a new list, I suppose, of prospective new clients. And then Hayley and I, so it's a joint National PM Day with Hayley Mitchell and myself and my team, and we're getting interviewed, which is it wasn't my preference, but my team made me do it, just to talk about our journey, and I suppose a bit like we've done here today, Kate, just reminding people that it's such a good industry. And Hayley and I friends, but we're competitors, but we do it respectfully. And, together, I think we can make a better industry as well.
Yay. There's plenty of competition for everybody, isn't there, really?
Yeah,
You
there
always
really
stand out if
is.
you do a good job, no matter
Yeah.
the industry.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to see you at your Property Managers Day. And thank you.
Thanks for having me,
Leah,
Kate.
I will make sure all of your links are near this recording, whether you're watching the video or you're listening to the podcast. Leah's links will be available somewhere near this video.